The murder of Grace Millane was committed in Auckland, New Zealand on 2 December 2018. Grace Millane, a British tourist, was murdered by 26-year-old man Jess Shane Kempson. Kempson was charged with a murder on 8 December 2018. Millane's body was found in the Waitakere Ranges to the west of Auckland the following day. Kempson also went on a Tinder date that day while her body was still in his room. Kempson's name was suppressed by New Zealand courts until 2020, meaning it could not be published in New Zealand. However, some international media outlets chose to publish it contrary to the New Zealand court order. Welcome to 10-Minute Crime. I'm your host Josh, and today we're diving into the case of Grace Millane. But before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories that will keep you guessing what happens next. The tragic case of Grace Millane. The murder of Grace Millane is one of the most heartbreaking and disturbing crimes in recent years, shocking both New Zealand and the world. In December 2018, Grace, a British tourist, disappeared while on a backpacking trip in Auckland. The man responsible for her death, 26-year-old Jess Shane Kempson, was arrested and charged shortly after her body was discovered. This case not only highlighted the vulnerability of young travelers, but also sparked a nationwide conversation about violence against women. Kempson was tried in the Auckland High Court in November 2019. He claimed that Grace had died accidentally during consensual activity, but after a 3-week trial, a unanimous jury found him guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. Kempson attempted to appeal his conviction, but it was dismissed by New Zealand's Court of Appeal in December 2020. His name, previously suppressed, was revealed to the public later that same month. Background and disappearance. Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born on December 2, 1996, in Wickford, Essex, United Kingdom. After recently graduating with a degree in advertising and marketing, she embarked on a solo backpacking trip during her gap year. New Zealand was one of the countries she had been most excited to visit. Grace entered the country on November 20, 2018, and traveled around the North Island, arriving in Auckland on November 30. On the evening of December 1, Grace was last seen on CCTV footage at 9:41 p.m. at the City Life Hotel in Auckland with Jessica Kempson. Her family grew concerned when she did not respond to birthday messages on December 2. When they were unable to reach her, her disappearance was reported to the New Zealand police and a search began. Investigation. After several days of searching, police gathered evidence indicating that Grace was no longer alive. On December 8, authorities announced they were treating the case as a homicide. Jess Kempson, the last person seen with Grace, was arrested and charged with a murder. On December 9, Grace's body was found in a wooded area off Scenic Drive in the Waitakere Ranges, about 19 kilometers west of Auckland. Investigations continued, and on December 10, an autopsy confirmed the tragic circumstances of her death. Police also asked for public help in locating a shovel and a rental car that Kempson had used during the days following her disappearance, and both were later recovered. Kempson's arrest and background. Kempson, a 26-year-old from Wellington, was taken into custody on December 8, 2018. He had a troubled past and was estranged from his family. Raised by his father and grandfather after his parents separated, Kempson had moved between various jobs and even lived in Sydney, Australia, for several years. His record included minor offenses, but nothing that hinted at the violent crime he would eventually commit. Name suppression and trial. Initially, Kempson's name was suppressed by New Zealand courts to ensure his right to a fair trial. However, his identity was published by international media, sparking controversy. Google even included his name in trending email newsletters, drawing sharp criticism from New Zealand's Justice Minister. Despite this, Kempson's name remained suppressed in New Zealand until December 2020, when the Supreme Court lifted the order. The trial began in November 2019, with the prosecution arguing that Kempson had intentionally caused Grace's death and then took steps to cover up the crime. Evidence included surveillance footage of the couple, internet searches made by Kempson, and witness testimonies from other women who had met him through dating apps. Kempson's defense argued that Grace's death had been accidental, but the jury rejected this claim, and he was found guilty. Kempson's other criminal offenses, including charges of assault and threatening behavior unrelated to Grace's case, were later revealed after the suppression was lifted. Reactions. The murder of Grace Millane devastated both New Zealand and the UK. On December 10, 2018, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made an emotional public apology to Grace's family, saying, "Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't." The University of Lincoln, where Grace had studied, expressed their sadness, and candlelight vigils were held across New Zealand to honor her memory. However, some media coverage drew criticism for focusing too much on Grace's appearance and background, leading to discussions about missing white woman syndrome, which highlights the disproportionate media attention given to certain victims. Grace's funeral was held on January 10, 2019 in Essex, where hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects. The public outpouring of grief reflected how deeply her story had affected people worldwide. Love Grace charity. In the wake of this tragedy, Grace's mother, Grace Millane, and her cousin, Hannah O'Callaghan, founded the Love Grace charity to help women affected by domestic violence. The charity collects handbags filled with toiletries for victims of abuse. To date, they have donated over 15,600 handbags across the UK and internationally. Their efforts have raised awareness about domestic violence, helping to ensure that Grace's legacy continues to make a positive impact. In 2024, Gillian and Hannah were recognized with OBE awards for their charitable work, trial and appeals. During the trial, the Crown presented strong evidence, including surveillance footage, testimonies, and forensic findings. Kempson's actions after Grace's death, such as disposing of evidence and creating a false narrative, were central to the prosecution's case. After 3 weeks, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Kempson later appealed, but his conviction was upheld in December 2020, and the suppression order on his name was lifted. Further revelations about his violent past emerged during the appeals process, showing a pattern of harmful behavior. Conclusion. The murder of Grace Millane was a tragedy that left an indelible mark on both New Zealand and the world. Her family's strength and the efforts through the Love Grace charity continue to honor her memory by supporting women facing domestic violence. If this case moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more true crime stories that shine a light on the victims and their legacies. I'm your host Josh, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe.